Hello and welcome to yet another episode of the Recreant Journals. I'm your host, the Recreant. Today I have for you three encounters. Creepy encounters, of course. I hope you enjoy them, for the lesson here is to be learned is that sometimes even the humans can be the monsters.
I went to a typical YMCA summer camp when I was in middle school. It was a 2 week session every summer and was exhaustingly fun. We'd stay up all night and tell stories or dare each other to do stuff. One night, we'd planned a pillow raid on a girl's cabin where we'd sneak through the woods with pillows and creep into their cabin to have a pillow fight. This was to be retaliation for the same girls throwing our clotheslines into a tree. We snuck over to their cabin and wallowed through everyone with pillows. Counselors began yelling and shining lights as we all ran off. I lost the group, but my friend Brad and I stayed in pursuit of someone who went in a different direction. We assumed they knew a shortcut or secret way back. They ended up diving into a bush somewhere off the path in the woods between the boys' and girls' cabins. Brad and I followed quietly. We squatted down in the bush next to an individual who was not part of our cabin and wasn't part of the pillow fight either. Confused as to whether or not we should be quiet still or run flat, I screamed and grabbed Brad to run with me. I remember seeing this individual's eyes as they raised a finger to try and shush us up, but we bolted. We got back to the cabin and tried to recount what happened. It became clear that the person in the woods was a creep who was just coincidentally watching the girls' cabin at the same time as us. About 3 years ago, I used to attend an old boarding school in Quebec. The school doubled as a retirement home for priests. I never saw much of the priests during my year in the school. They mostly kept to themselves. There were always kind of dumb rumors about the school. The school was a really old building. I'm talking about 300 years old, kind of old. There had been many tragedies around the school. There was an outbreak of yellow fever and measles, even tuberculosis. The school got converted into a makeshift hospital. Later on, the school got set on fire and a priest was said to have killed one student. There's even an old cemetery close to the school grounds. So, if any place is haunted, I believe it would be that school. There's just something odd, sad, and even foreboding about it. Some places have cold spots. There are hidden crawl spaces and secret dorms. The school is filled with sorrow and despair. Something in the school caused students and faculty that live there to become extremely depressed. To this day, I think something or some things are trapped between those walls. I've never been religious, but I felt like cleansing my soul and confessing my sins. So at 10 p.m., I went to the chapel looking for a priest to confess to. I found a lonely confessionary at the end of the chapel with a light on inside. I thought, perfect, some privacy, no one will hear me but the priest. So I went to the confessionary and got in. The priest spoke in French for a little bit, till I interrupted him. I told him I can barely speak French. Shortly he started talking in English, a broken English, but I could understand. I felt his breath through the grate, and even felt him moving around. His voice was soft and sort of calming. I confessed my sins, truly repented. He later started talking about my soul, saying that I should be truly repented, because God confined sinners to the limbo of the world. I got a little uneasy, but I kind of agreed. After that, it got quiet, and he gave me my penance. Just some 20 Holy Mary prayers. I thanked him, and asked if he would be here next week for my next planned confession. I got no answer, heard no more movement, and again I asked, and I heard no answer. I got out of the confessionary and stared at the priest's door. I worked up the courage to knock on it. No response was given. I opened the door slowly and found no one inside. After that, I left the chapel pretty creeped out and never went back to confess my sins in that chapel. The details of this event happened a long time ago, but I do remember, as I was in elementary school at the time. Please, don't judge me and dismiss the story due to it being at a young age. Now, anyways, at the time I believe I was in the 3rd grade. Now, I was born and raised Christian, and thus I believe heavily in the supernatural. At the time, I remember a lot of hype around the Bloody Mary challenge. You know, when you go in a mirror and turn off the lights, flush all the toilets, and do the chant. Yeah, that one. Many people believe it's harmless fun, but leave out the entirety of the ritual. More on that later. Well, one day I remember I had just asked my homeroom teacher, Miss Foster, to use the bathroom. She obliged, and I was well on my way. As I entered the bathroom, I stumbled upon 2 friends of mine, Tyler and Robert. I asked them, "What are you doing?" As they had turned off the lights and the only light visible was from the outside window. Robert mentioned they were going to try to summon Bloody Mary. Upon hearing this, I was about to nope the hell out of there, but I stuck around because I really had to pee. Tyler and Robert then began flushing all the toilets, turning off the faucets, until it was just mine remaining. Tyler then said, "Come on, man, flush already." He and Robert began pleading as they didn't want to start over. I stood there, scared, not wanting to take place in this unholy sanction, but I flushed. Robert then got in the mirror and began the chant, he and Tyler both. Now here's where details kind of get hazy. All I remember was being scared as it turned darker than I've ever seen before, with this grayish tinge to the darkness. Just then, Tyler shouted out, "What is that?" Without warning, he and Robert then began screaming and crying. I began to walk out the bathroom with my head down, but something just had to make me glance at the mirror. And that is where I saw something that still lives in my nightmares. A dark figure with long black hair and red blood streaming from its eyes. As Tyler and Robert screamed, the entity then pointed a finger at Robert. That dark, decrepit finger. And then, so unnaturally, Robert's nose began to bleed. I then quickly turned on the lights and it disappeared. Tyler sat in a corner crying as I got both of them up. 2 teachers were there, and I told them what happened. They didn't believe it, of course, and they thought Tyler and Robert had a fight. I mean, honestly, who would believe a story like that? Anyways, remember what I said about the entirety of the ritual? Well, Bloody Mary summoner often lose someone in death, and Robert would in turn be that one, which explains the nosebleed and the pointing. His sister would go on to have a fatal car crash that same week. Mere coincidence? Bad luck? Or was there truly something more behind the Bloody Mary ritual? I'll let you decide, but one thing I know is that thing will forever haunt me.